Have you ever watched a movie and thought to yourself about maybe halfway through the film, man, I am not the target audience for this? Such a phenomena has occurred more than its fair share of times in relation to my movie-going habits. Now, art itself is subjective, and this is clearly the case in relation to film in general. Cinema is a vast spectrum full of individual tastes and opinions in relation to specific pieces, which is part of why I love this art form so much. The vast array of thoughts and feelings on one specific film can open up such a complex exploration to its intricacies and details, and sharing this with others is such a powerful feeling. However, on the flip side, it can also be hard to get into a film personally if you just aren't really interested in its subject matter. This is especially apparent over the last few years alone, in which more and more intellectual properties across a vast array of mediums and formats are getting adapted to the big screen, whether it's television shows or video games. It's not that I can't appreciate these films from a cinematic and thematic standpoint as a critic, but it also simultaneously does feel like you miss out if you aren't already a fan of the property, and you're not able to pick up on many of the little details hidden within that property. This is something I always keep in the back of my mind, and it's a subject that I considered and pondered at length as I prepared to watch one of the major motion picture releases in theaters this weekend. And I already reviewed one battle after another, so it's not that. Which means it's none other than the new Dreamworks Animation film, Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie. I am just as shocked as you probably are that I actually watched this movie. It seems almost baffling that I willingly devoted my time and effort to sitting in a movie theater and watching this movie. However, as a critic, I feel that it is my duty and role to provide coverage and analysis across all arrays and forms of film and television content. And thus I find that it would only be fair to review this film, since it is indeed a main point of conversation within this film's box office weekend and beyond. Now, to answer the question that is probably on many of your minds at this moment, I was not sure what exactly to expect as I walked into this film. I am not familiar with the original television show that this film was based on. I have been subjected to trailers before movie releases over the last few months for this film, but those small pieces of marketing provided little to no context or information into what this film actually was or what it contained within its runtime. I didn't know what the storyline would be, if there was one, or whether the film itself would be kind of good in general. Now, as a critic, I have an interesting relationship with children's entertainment out there. Part of my job involves analyzing and critiquing all pieces of media, no matter the genre or target demographic, and as such, I've had to subject myself to a fair share of mindless drivel at the box office, especially in the last few years alone. It seems that now, more often than not, studios think that kids are stupid. They seem to think that children won't be able to recognize lazy entertainment for what it actually is. And as a result, the focus of these films seems less intent on telling a set story and more intent on cramming as many vibrant and colorful jokes and moments in as possible. Children's movies recently are dumb, for lack of a better word. And this has been a topic of conversation that I've focused on and talked about at length over the last few years alone. For example, earlier this year, I watched and reviewed the new Smurfs animated movie that hit the box office over the summer. And in my analysis and review of that work, I highlighted and pointed out many of the problematic and quite often lazy elements that were not only individual to that film, but overall indicative of and inclusive to many other children's movies of that caliber as well. You see, the best way that I could possibly describe these kids' movies recently is that they're brain rot, pure and simple. Intent on replicating the experience that a child might have scrolling through an iPad tablet over anything inherently nuanced or capable, these movies are intent on filling every second of the runtime with as many dumb jokes and moments as possible. Yet even beyond this, it seems that the main plot of these movies isn't much of a plot at all. Rather, the recent trend in these children's films is that the story itself is made up of smaller individual side plots, which are then strung together with weak narrative string to form a facsimile of a story. Yet, as a string frays and begins to break apart, it's easy to see and recognize these films for what they truly are: uninspired, dull, and lazy to begin with. It seems that the days of studios truly recognizing and honing in on the strengths in relation to these movies in this space is over. And as a result, I've had to dole out my fair share of negative ratings in regards to these movies, and if you're a fan of this channel, you'll probably know that at this point. People often treat this as negative in and of itself, as if these movies are simply void and averse to any form of criticism simply because they cater to a younger audience. After all, I've legitimately had people tell me openly that I shouldn't review these movies because quote unquote I'm not a kid and therefore the movie was not made for me. Yet I would go a step further than this and make my case that in reviewing these movies from a critical analysis, I'm not only looking at a film from a technical and cinematic standpoint, but I'm simultaneously allowing these parents to examine whether these movies are worth not only their time, attention, and money, but their child's attention as well. And in this regard, I set out to do just that this weekend with Gabby's Dollhouse the movie. To say I walked into my local theater on Saturday morning at 9:30 a.m. with anything other than dread in my mind is an understatement. It's not a fun feeling at all to walk into a movie that you know you're probably going to hate. And as such, I prepared myself mentally to truly witness whatever it was I was about to witness. As I settled into my recliner and the noisy din of the few other families in my screening scattered throughout the auditorium, I kind of steeled myself in for the reality that this movie would probably be in line with many of those other kids' films I'd reviewed in past. And I was was fully prepared to rip into every negative quality that this movie showcases in regards to lazy and stupid narrative storytelling. Yet an hour and 30 minutes later, as I walked out of my screening of Gabby's Dollhouse the movie, my immediate reaction was not one of disgust and disappointment, but of respect? Now, let me clear this up right here and right now. Gabby's Dollhouse is not a good movie. I did not like this film at all, and that is selling it short. We will get into my fair share of issues with the movie, as you might have guessed, as it is a simplistic and superficial film for a variety of reasons. Yet somehow, I walked out of this film respecting it and what it accomplishes overall. How is that even possible? Well, I'll tell you the exact reason why this occurred, and it took me a few hours of contemplation and thought to reach this conclusion. The reason I ended up respecting Gabby's Dollhouse the movie, even if I didn't love the end product, is because it's not like those other children's movies out there currently. For the first time in, I can't even tell you how long it's been, this children's film is not pure brain rot. Granted, there's a fairly simple story here, and Gabby's Dollhouse the movie is not breaking any narrative ground here, not as if anyone seriously expected it to, but it at least attempts to do something with the material here, even if it doesn't stick the landing overall. It is a movie that is blatantly aimed at children and toddlers, and that much is apparent. But it doesn't feel quite as unintelligent as many of the other children's movies of this caliber. It actually kind of has something to say, no matter how buried down underneath the glossy surface it might be. It feels created and crafted with a unique purpose and goal, as if the team behind it cared about creating a film for kids that they could identify with and most of all, feel. And above all, and this is a main point of contention for other children's films in my opinion, it's a kids movie that actually has an overarching storyline. Thank you so much. For these reasons and more, I find that while my review of Gabby's Dollhouse, the movie that is to follow, is certainly going to be more negative in tone from the standpoint of a film critic analyzing the craft of the film in particular, I want to go a step further in terms of inner nuance by making the claim here that I do find that if parents want to take their kids to see this movie, they could do so much worse. It's pretty ridiculous at times and intentionally dumb as any children's fare is, but the movie overall is not soulless, and that makes all the difference. And for that reason, although I walked out not liking the film overall, I actually did respect it in the end. Gabby's Dollhouse the movie follows the titular character, played by Lalia Lockhart Craner, who has a magical dollhouse full of small toys who come to life as Gabby shrinks down to play with them every day. After Gabby and her dolls take a road trip with her grandmother Gigi, played by Gloria Estefan, to Cat Francisco, they find more than they bargained for when the dollhouse attracts the attention of Vera, played by Kristen Wiig, an obsessed cat collector who thinks the dollhouse will complete her collection perfectly. With the dolls captured and taken to Vera's mansion, Gabby will have to work to get them back and will learn so much more about herself in the process. It goes without saying, but obviously if you listen to that plot synopsis and you still expect something narratively profound or earth-shattering here, you're pretty much missing the point of this film. This is a movie, after all, where the main characters take a trip to a location called Cat Francisco for crying out loud. And what makes Cat Francisco different from regular San Francisco, you might ask? Well, they added cat ears to the Golden Gate Bridge and made it pink. Rather, I make the wager that Gabby's Dollhouse the movie is not a film that is setting out to do anything intrinsically different from its source material, of which I am not familiar with in the slightest. And in that regard, as mentioned, this is solely and unabashedly a movie made for kids through and through. It's not catering to any demographic outside of this, and can you really blame them? It's not like adults out there themselves are clamoring for a Gabby's Dollhouse movie. In fact, I would not have personally watched this movie unless I was a critic working on this assignment. Yet, instead of this targeted execution being a blight on the film itself and therefore tanking the film as a whole, it needs to be said that Gabby's Dollhouse the movie cannot be faulted in this regard. This is a movie targeted for kids, but I mean, that's the point. I've seen too many people who are older getting mad about that as if it's not a kid's movie in general. The story might seem superficial, the jokes might be campy, and it's more than colorful and vibrant in many sequences throughout the film, but none of it feels outside the capacities of this film or what it tries to achieve. It's not executing the material in a way that feels purposely stupid or unintelligent like so many other kids' films. Rather, it's executing the material in a way that makes sense given the context and role of what audiences flocking to this movie want and expect, which is at the end of the day admirable on the part of the filmmakers. Many filmmakers, as mentioned within the children's entertainment space nowadays, think kids are unintelligent, and therefore much of the nuance that was held within this caliber of film in the past has been lost, replaced with over-the-top humor and lackluster storylines that seem intent on cramming in popular social media references and gags over anything inherently spirited or motivated. Yet outside of this context, Gabby's Dollhouse is a movie that steps away from this exact trope and stereotype that has invaded these movies as of late, and actually carves its own path forward. The material here is probably not going to work for anyone over the age of 6 or 7, but the major difference between between this and much of the content within the children's entertainment market space is vast and notable for anyone to witness. This is especially prevalent within the emotional core of this film in particular, which is a nuanced exploration to the role and inherent value of toys and the problem of growing up and maturing through this lens. Kind of in a similar vein to what the Toy Story franchise explored. You see, one of the main antagonists of the film is a cat stuffed animal named Chumsley, who used to be a beloved companion of Vera's before she grew up and therefore neglected his attention and appreciation. Yet this shift has changed Chumsley's outlook on life, who now views children as nothing more than superficial, simple, and traitorous, and therefore it instills Gabby's toys to look at her through a completely different viewpoint as someone who will abandon her toys at the first sign of change. This opens up such a nuanced exploration to these ideas and themes, which is often broached with surprising poignancy, especially later on throughout the film in Kristen Wiig's character Vera. As she explains to Gabby throughout one particular monologue later on in the film, there is a specific gloss and charm that covers most of the world when you're a child, in which opportunity and hope fill every waking moment, and anything in the world seems achievable, as if the stars above shine as bright as they possibly can. Yet, as Vera explains in the film, once you get older, those stars start to lose their shine slowly, and that similar hopeful viewpoint on the world becomes grizzled and hardened. You are still yourself through and through, but you no longer have that sense of whimsy and charm due to a world that beats down the thought of such behavior and optimism. And through this lens, the film attempts to broach this a poignant and quite impactful angle in this regard. And as a viewer watching this film, you almost begin to understand that viewpoint yourself as you watch the movie. If there is one thing that is indicated throughout the runtime of this movie, it's that the world on display throughout this film is a world that is very much so through the viewpoint of a child, in which colorful visuals and vibrant designs almost paint a world similar to our own, albeit with more flair and creativity in every waking second. And it's these moments that remind older audiences, and I feel especially parents watching this film with their kids, of the loss of that viewpoint ourselves, and how we have lost sight of those ideas and qualities that truly make life matter in the most simple of senses. And it's through this light and idea that Gabby's Dollhouse the movie at least attempts to cover somewhat solid narrative and thematic ground. Although whether the film succeeds in conveying these ideas in a way that feels nuanced or impactful is another discussion entirely. As mentioned, because, stop me if you've heard this one before, this is a movie catered solely to kids, the impact of this film in every single regard, from the script to the emotional nuance to the thematic structure itself, is present, yet seems dumbed down in almost every sense of the word. Yet, although this is clearly a blight on the film itself, I appreciate its inclusion here overall because it sets the film apart from those other children's films of recent memory that don't even attempt to convey a semblance of nuance within their storylines. And in that regard, although Gabby's Dollhouse is not a great movie overall, and I will keep saying that over and over again, there are at least some qualities that viewers of all ages can appreciate. In particular, the animation style used is quite fun and colorful, and actually blends 3D animation elements with a live action setting in a way that feels visually interesting and artistically captivating. You can tell that a lot of hard work and dedication went into the visual style and animation of this film, and is incredibly commendable in this regard. And I have to give proper honorable mention to Kristen Wiig here, who absolutely goes all into her performance as Vera here and manages to stand apart as one of the best qualities of this film overall, bar none. Overall though, to say that I would recommend Gabby's Dollhouse the movie to most audiences, or even go so far as to call it a good movie, is a stretch. However, I do find it quite disingenuous and often dangerous to make the claim within the modern film criticism industry that you can find a movie bad and therefore not find anything redeeming about it. In this regard, I have to make it abundantly clear yet again that I am analyzing this movie from the standpoint of a professional film critic. As a person who lies outside of that main target demographic and analyzes film for a living, I therefore have to analyze how the film is simplified in every sense of the word, and how unappealing it was overall to me as an average viewer. However, at the same time, I understand that I am not the demographic for this movie. I understand that the young fan base behind Gabby's Dollhouse the movie is particularly passionate towards this property, and many young kids out there are looking forward to seeing this world portrayed on the big screen. And if you're the parent of a small child who wants to see this movie who is currently watching this video, and you want to see if it's worth taking your kids to see this in theaters, listen here. I would say yes. And the reason being is because, as mentioned before, this feels so much more motivated and different in practically every other regard from other kids' movies recently. After years of wanting to literally and figuratively bang my head against a wall post-screening of most movies of this caliber, to see a movie that is clearly targeted towards kids yet ultimately has something to say and convey in its runtime, no matter how well it ultimately does this, is a positive in and of itself, and I will never critique that. Maybe this will lay the groundwork for future installments in the kids genre going forward, in which filmmakers and studios start to understand that in order to cater to their core audience, they will have to start stepping up their game in every sense of the word. And in that regard, even though I will unfortunately be giving Gabby's Dollhouse the movie a negative review here, I did not walk out of this movie ultimately disappointed and let down. Rather, I respected it from this particular standpoint, even if I didn't love the movie. It has to be respected that the entire filmmaking team behind this one sought to tell a specific story that feels somewhat grounded over that mindless brain rot style content from properties of past. And on that level, I find it necessary to make the claim that there are so many worse movies you could watch out there with your kids. If you see see my rating for this film, and you're discouraged from taking your younger audience members out there to see this movie, I want to tell you that this should not be the case whatsoever. Rather, I'm analyzing this film from a viewpoint of most film criticism out there, which is in the analysis of its core story moments and technical craft, which isn't anything revolutionary here to say the least. Yet at the same time, and this seems very different from other film critics out there who are complaining about this movie over and over again, I recognize that this film was not inherently crafted for a 20-year-old college student male film critic to rip apart. And from that lens, I'm able to understand, and most importantly, analyze the strengths of this film in comparison to other modern-day films within this space. That's why I'm giving Gabby's Dollhouse the movie a 1.5 out of 5 stars. Hey guys, thanks so much for watching this review on my channel. If you're new around here and you like the content you see, don't forget to click that subscribe button down below, like the video, and turn on push notifications. Also, leave comment suggestions down below for future video, essay, and review topics. With that being said, until next time, this is Mitchell signing off. Peace out.